Yo, what's up everybody? Today we're diving into a story of two halves, a peninsula split down the middle. I'm talking about North and South Korea, two countries that were once one, unified under a pretty rough period of Japanese rule. From 1910 to 1945, Korea was basically Japan's playground, stripped of its resources and culture. Imagine your annoying older sibling taking over your room, except on a national scale. Not cool, Japan, not cool. But hey, history is messy, right? After World War II, Japan was like that kid in school who got caught cheating on a test. They got punished, had to give up all their ill-gotten gains, including Korea. But here's where things get really interesting. Instead of just handing Korea its independence papers and being done with it, the big boys, the US and the Soviet Union, decided to, you guessed it, meddle. They split the peninsula in two, right down the middle, at the 38th parallel. It was supposed to be temporary, just until they figured out what to do with Korea. But as we know, temporary things have a way of becoming permanent, especially when you've got two superpowers playing tug-of-war with a whole nation. The US took the south, the Soviets took the north, and just like that, one Korea became two, divided by an arbitrary line in the sand. Now, you might think, a line? What's the big deal? Well, this wasn't just any line. The 38th parallel became a symbol of the Cold War, the global showdown between communism and capitalism. It was like the invisible wall in Germany, only in this case it was a line on a map that separated families, friends and a shared history. In the north, the Soviets installed Kim Il-sung, a communist leader who ruled with an iron fist. Think of him as the OG Kim, the grandfather of the current supreme leader, Kim Jong-un. In the south, the US backed Syngman Rhee, an authoritarian leader who wasn't exactly a poster child for democracy. So you had two different ideologies, two different systems of government, and two very different visions for the future of Korea, all crammed onto one little peninsula. It was a recipe for disaster. And you know what they say about when you keep stirring the pot. Boom! Just like that, the pot boiled over. In 1950, North Korea, backed by the Soviets and China, decided to take matters into their own hands. They invaded South Korea, kicking off the Korean War. Now, this wasn't just some border skirmish. This was a full-blown conflict with the US and its allies jumping in to defend the South. Imagine a family Thanksgiving dinner gone wrong, only with tanks and bombs instead of mashed potatoes and gravy. It was brutal, with millions of people losing their lives, both soldiers and civilians. It's a dark chapter in Korean history, a reminder of the human cost of division and ideological warfare. After 3 years of fighting, a ceasefire was finally reached in 1953. But here's the kicker. There was no peace treaty, just an armistice. It's like pausing a game but never hitting the save button. The two Koreas were still technically at war, separated by a demilitarized zone, or DMZ, a heavily guarded buffer zone that remains one of the most tense borders in the world. So the war ended, but the division remained. And over the next few decades, North and South Korea took two very different paths. In the north, the Kim dynasty continued, with Kim Il-sung passing the baton to his son, Kim Jong-il, in 1994. They maintained a strict communist regime, isolating themselves from the rest of the world and focusing on military might over the well-being of their own people. You know, the whole let them eat cake mentality, except there was no cake, just a lot of propaganda and empty promises. Meanwhile, South Korea, with the help of the US and other allies, experienced an economic miracle. They embraced capitalism, invested in education and technology, and transformed themselves from a war-torn nation into a global economic powerhouse. It's like that underdog team that everyone wrote off, only to come back and win the championship. Section 5, the Hermit Kingdom inside North Korea. Now, let's be real, North Korea gets a lot of bad press. And for good reason. They've got a history of human rights abuses, a nuclear weapons program that keeps the world on edge, and a cult of personality surrounding the Kim family that's, well, let's just say it's a bit extra. Imagine a country where you can't even choose your own haircut, let alone your career or political views. Yeah, not exactly my idea of a good time. Information is tightly controlled, access to the outside world is limited, and any form of dissent is met with swift and brutal punishment. It's like living in a real-life Truman Show, only instead of Jim Carrey, you've got Kim Jong-un watching your every move. Section 6. The Miracle on the Han River, South Korea's Rise. On the flip side, South Korea became a shining example of what can happen when a country embraces democracy, innovation, and a little bit of K-pop. I mean, who doesn't love a good BTS dance break? They went from being one of the poorest countries in the world to a technological giant, home to global brands like Samsung, Hyundai, and LG. They even hosted the 2018 Winter Olympics, which, let's be honest, is way more impressive than any military parade. But it's not just about the economy. South Korea has also made great strides in human rights and democracy. They've had their fair share of political scandals and protests, sure. But that's all part of being a free and open society. You know, the kind where you can criticize the government without getting thrown in a gulag. Section 7. A Glimmer of Hope. The 2018 Summit. Now, despite all the tension and mistrust, there have been moments of hope in the story of the two Koreas. One of the most significant was the 2018 summit between Kim Jong-un and then South Korean President Moon Jae-in. It was a historic moment, the first time leaders from both sides had met in over a decade. They shook hands, smiled for the cameras, and even took a stroll together through the DMZ. It was enough to melt even the iciest of Cold War hearts. They signed a declaration vowing to work towards denuclearization and a peace treaty. And for a brief moment, it seemed like reunification might actually be within reach. It was like that scene in Romeo and Juliet where they fall in love, except instead of feuding families, it was two countries armed with enough firepower to destroy the world. No pressure, guys. Section 8, Walls of Division, Bridges of Hope. But as we all know, love and diplomacy can be complicated. The 2018 summit was followed by a series of stalled talks and renewed tensions. The walls of division, built over decades of mistrust and animosity, proved to be more resilient than the bridges of hope. The nuclear issue remained a major sticking point, with North Korea reluctant to give up its weapons program and the US hesitant to lift sanctions until they did. It was a classic chicken and egg situation, only with much higher stakes. Section 9. The Future of Two Koreas. So, where do we go from here? The future of the two Koreas remains uncertain. The possibility of reunification, once a distant dream, seems further away than ever. The two sides are still technically at war, separated by a heavily fortified border and years of mistrust. But even in the darkest of times, there is always hope. The human spirit has a way of finding cracks in the walls of division, building bridges of understanding and compassion. There are countless stories of families separated by the DMZ, longing for the day they can be reunited. There are activists and organizations working tirelessly to promote dialogue and reconciliation. And there is a growing awareness, especially among younger generations, that the future of Korea lies not in division, but in unity. Section 10, One Peninsula, One Dream. The story of North and South Korea is a cautionary tale about the dangers of division, the human cost of conflict, and the enduring power of hope. It's a story that continues to unfold, with each new chapter filled with both challenges and opportunities. Will the two Koreas finally find a path to peace and reunification? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain, the dream of a unified Korea, a peninsula healed from the wounds of the past, continues to burn bright in the hearts of many. And hey, if a comedian from South Africa can talk about this without making light of the situation, maybe there's hope for us all. Peace out.